New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you here on the New Thought Media Network. It's New Thought today. My co-host, Reverend LZ Sekou, is here with me. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, happy afternoon.
Good to see you. Glad you're with us, and glad anyone out there in virtual land is with us as well. Please do hit the like button, the share button, the subscribe button, whatever button it is that might give you some pleasure, and let your friends know what we're doing here. This is New Thought Today. We get together every week and talk about the evolving spiral of New Thought, where things are taking us, where New Thought is going, where we're going with it. And I realized earlier today, Z, it feels like you and I, we've had so many guests this summer and travel and special conferences and special events that it's been a while since just you and I sat around and gabbed a bit on this program.
Yes.
So I'm glad we're here today.
Yes, I'm glad we're here. It's been a moment, but it's been a great moment, so to speak, in that we've had a lot of activity, some great insights from around the New Thought world, if you will. And so I'm looking forward to the day to kind of chop it up a little bit about what we've learned and experienced and the kinds of conversations we've had in relationship to New Thought and the future, however you want to imagine it.
Yes. However we want to imagine it. I like that idea. So let's catch people up a little bit. When we talk about this summer, we're going to go back to the early part, actually before the summer. Back in March, at the end of March, there was a one-day conference with the affiliated New Thought Network, and New Thought Media Network was involved. And what started to emerge was an idea of a conversation about how do we put all these various, and I'm going to use the word specifically, factions of New Thought. How do we get everybody back under one umbrella? How do we get everybody to start working together, playing together, being together? And I think really at that point, just the question was asked. However, what we soon also came to realize was the International New Thought Alliance was already working on that question. And they were putting together a panel of people in Chicago this past July. Now, we had a chance to be there and help broadcast that, and was an amazing conversation. Coincidentally enough, or let's not call it a coincidence, there's a group coming together, the People of African Descent New Thought Group, and they put together a conference celebrating our soul. Now, we do happen to know this was in works for about a year and a half, almost 2 years to get to this point. And that happened in August. Z, you got to be there and see a whole nother aspect of this conversation emerging. The fun part is, folks, it's still happening. And there's another conference coming up in a couple of weeks with the affiliated New Thought Network where even more of this may happen. So, Z, I guess I'm going to kick it back to you. From what you've seen this summer and all that we've been talking about, and I mean, we've had some amazing guests on this program this summer that have been talking about this. What do you think is most impactful, and what is most important for us to be paying attention to from the lesson of this summer?
Yeah, I think having been involved in some and listening to others and just getting the gist, if you will, is that the nature of not only New Thought, but the nature of spiritual communities is changing. And how we as spiritual communities and spiritual leaders, if you will, or spiritual teachers or spiritual guides, and pick a word that resonates. People have different affinities, but whichever one resonates with you in terms of how we come together as a unit of people who are concerned about life and all things living. How do we begin to have an approach to life, an institution where people can be grounded in that aspect, different, if you will, from the traditional way of coming on Sundays or Wednesdays or Saturdays? Most centers have, most churches have a couple of events a week, but previously there have been a one-way conversation, the pulpit giving out to the community. And now, after COVID and online, I think people are beginning to see there are different ways of picking up that messages, and there are some more engaging ways to interact with these institutions to address the community. Yeah. I was kind of long-winded but it's such a dynamic and all-encompassing approach now that I think we have to do. It's kind of we haven't coined the right words yet to articulate it.
Right, exactly. However, while you were sharing there, I was struck by the image of the telegraph. Nobody sends telegraphs or telegrams anymore, and at one point that was the only way, that was the standard. Yes. And for the longest time, spiritual communities had one standard way, maybe a couple of variations of that. We get a women's group or a men's group or a teen group or whatever, but had one primary standard way of getting the message out. And if there's anything we've learned over the last few years, it's that there's a whole lot of other ways to get the message out as well. And I think as spiritual communities have been forced to look at that, in many ways, we've also been forced to look at how we built silos and how we were more concerned with, getting people in my chairs rather than getting people in a chair somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, the some churches that I think are on the leading edge or progressive edge, if you will, are looking at how do they make a community work through partnership in a community. How do we people or organizations of like attainment and similar visions in terms of how we serve the community, or better yet, serve your congregation or serve the people? How do we do that effectively? And this idea of, as you were saying, my center and your center, where we're duplicating efforts, where we're not taking full advantage of the resources we have. How do we begin to work more collectively, and provide the services that we are saying that's important to us, to the community?
Right. Well, and and you're touching on an important part. How do we work more collectively? Right. And that's really, really, well, folks, I think that's the most important piece out of all of this. And we've been looking around a little bit and looking for some examples of, how do we work collectively? What is the call to work collectively? And I think one of the ones that most struck me, you shared an article with me here, Z. Where was that from again?
The one from Boston or the one from Denver?
Thy Black Man.
Oh, yes. I forget who wrote that article, but it's looking at churches and it's looking at it from African American perspective.
Yep.
About how do we use those tithes better?
Yep. And here's the piece that I love. And I'm going to quote the article here for you. We'll leave a link in the chat box for you. The Black churches in every community should be forming consortiums, pooling the tithes that they've collected every Sunday to purchase businesses, to provide jobs for our young people that pay a living wage, and to purchase property to provide affordable housing in the community. The churches should be open 7 days a week to provide affordable childcare for working mothers. They then should also hire unemployed mothers to help in the daycare centers. They should utilize the retired professionals in their congregation to help mentor and instruct the people in the community. And they do suggest that there be a citizens oversight committee to keep an eye on it all. Beyond the logistics of it, speak to us a little bit, Z. Is that possible? Is it possible for churches across the community area, neighborhood area, city area to invest in that way?
I think it is possible. And not only I think it's possible, it's necessary. If we're going to provide as spiritual centers and churches the guidance and leadership and the hand up in the community, because I'm sure every denomination of every religion across this country, for sure, they have seen the attendance down, they have seen the tithes and offerings down, and part of it is some of the research I've seen. Part of it is because the baby boomers who were kind of grew up in that tradition of going to church, they are beginning to make their transition or do other things, and the younger people were not really forced to go to church, and so now they're looking for different ways. And so we have these spiritual trappings, if you will, but the younger people are looking at them saying, yeah, I see you talking this talk, but I don't see you walking the walk. You're not helping provide jobs. You're not providing counseling or opportunities to get a head up on a GED program or something like that, where you get people involved in the community, not only just to help the church, but to help the individuals as well.
So it sounds to me like spirituality in the broader sense, New Thought specifically, in a lot of ways, we got, well, let's say sidelined by this process of self-help first to the exclusion, I believe, of helping those in our neighborhoods and our communities.
Yes. Yeah. Because self-help, as much as I love self-help, spirituality is not self-help in the traditional term or the traditional way it's presented in my book, right? Self-help is, from that perspective, the general populace is, how do I begin to examine myself, my life, my habits, in relationship to doing better, right? Now, the spiritual perspective is not a whole lot different, but it has at the center of it a belief in some ancient principles, tried and true, and some universal practices that begin to cultivate a holistic way of doing things. So I'm not just looking at how do I better myself. I'm looking at how do I better my relationships? How do I better my community? How do I better my outlook on life? And whereas self-help can do that potentially, the spiritual approach is grounded in a holistic view, not just me.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. And I throw you the softballs because it feels like far too many communities have got waylaid in that concept of, well, we'll just work on ourselves and everything else out there will change around us.
Right.
And we have to be not only the heart and the mind and the voice of the divine, but we have to be the hands and the back and the feet and the lifting and the cleaning and whatever it might be to to really live, I believe, this philosophy more than, they say we're a teaching and a healing order. How about if we were a living and a demonstrating order? I don't know. That might do something a little different for us. And
I like it.
I know you've seen not only some examples, and you've been looking and finding some examples, but so tell us a little bit about that as well. Tell us a little bit about what's happening here in Denver, the church we were exploring and learning more about.
Yes. So, in the height of the pandemic, there was a crisis on housing, and it hasn't gone away, but it was highlighted by the pandemic. And there's a church here in Denver, First Baptist Church of Denver. They had a big parking lot, and they set it up so that they provided pallets, if you will, and they set up tents and a controlled area with some restrooms and stuff for homeless people to have a way to live in a safe, nurturing, if you will, environment. And so now that has kind of passed, recently here, as in the last week, they're making an attempt. There was an announcement made that they're looking to partner with the developer to take that parking lot that they were using for that and create some affordable housing and some transitional housing in the community. So right now they're in conversation with the city of Denver. And I think right now the biggest thing is how high they can build it. They wanted a 9-story building. I think there may be some restrictions because it is downtown by the Capitol. But this idea of being able to partner, again, here's this partnership, and some people saying, well, they shouldn't be making, but if they're setting up a consortium, and I'll talk to that in a minute, a partnership that says we're going to build X number of houses, a certain number will be transitional, a certain number will be for moderate to low income, and the rest of them could be fair market, if you will. The whole idea of putting commercial space in there as well to make it a mixed use space. So there may be opportunities for people in the building to have employment in the building as well, getting rid of some transportation costs and those kinds of logistics that most transitional and low to middle income people have to deal with. Now you begin to create not only an environment in a community, but a model for others to begin to look at.
Right. And I think that's a huge part of the most important part, building a model for others to look at and say, okay, what can we do with our parking lot? Do we need that much parking lot? And what we know is transportation models and the way people transport themselves is changing. The proliferation of electric bicycles, scooters, other modes of transportation, especially in a more densely populated cityscape, urban area. Let's give people places to live rather than places to park.
Right. And the way they're doing these things creatively now, they build the buildings and they have parking on the ground. So you can still provide some parking within the complex itself, but it's not just that solely. So now you got this flatland parking lot with no other use. Put some limited parking, and, make it structured, and then boom, take it up.
Yes. Yes. So folks, all of these things we would love to hear from you. Right? What do you see in the world? Where do you see spiritual communities, churches? Because, all right, let's be totally transparent. Yeah, we're having this conversation in New Thought, but that doesn't mean these conversations are not happening in the Baptist Church and in other communities and in other faith traditions. So we got to build this coalition within New Thought, I believe, first, but simultaneously we have to be willing to build coalitions with all kinds of folks, church folk and non-church folk as well.
Yeah. Well, and go ahead.
I was just gonna say I keep pondering an emerging idea where it's not just the church doing the work, and it's not just the homeless shelter doing the work. It's organizational partnerships doing the work together.
Well, and that's where that whole idea of consortium that said we'd get back to comes into play. When you look at a traditional consortium, or they're sometimes called think tanks, right? They take the best and brightest, if you will, the most innovative and imaginative people, put them together, and ask them to model or think about or imagine the future. How can we, given the situation we're in now, the tools, the resources, and the challenges we have now, how do we overcome these? How do we take advantage of these? And how do we begin to utilize resources in the best way to get the best results? And so when you traditionally look at think tanks, they come up with these different ways of creating economical housing, or right now, in addition to the housing issue, we have a food issue, right? Of how we're using up land for housing. We don't have enough land now to grow food. The numbers are starting to change. So one of the things I've seen, and some of the audience may have seen it, is this whole idea of vertical gardening, right? There's a building, I think it's in South Dakota, but they have like I think it may be 10-story vertical garden, where they have a vertical garden that's all hydroponic. It rotates around, and they're providing, farm to table, if you will, food for a lot of the restaurants and homes in that community, taking up less space. They have employed a lot of people with disabilities to work there. Some with autism and different kinds of different ways of looking at life, and they are loving these jobs. They're in the perfect place. They feel uplifted and in charge. The community is getting fresh food. We're utilizing less of a footprint. I mean, it's just a win-win all the way around. But we need people to think outside the box to begin to do that. And as spiritual beings, we should be at the forefront of that, if not definitely right alongside everybody else that's thinking in that way.
Exactly. Yes. Because as you were talking, my thought is, yep, and let's take all that produce and bring it down to the ground floor where we have an industrial kitchen and a big old cafeteria. We don't need another Starbucks and another, this fast food or that boutique cafe. Bring it all downstairs, and we have one big community table, one big community cafeteria where the people of the building and the people in the surrounding area can all benefit and be eating good, healthy produce.
Yeah.
I think we got to call the architect at the Baptist church and tell him we got a new idea to add on.
Exactly. Because you think about it, right? When you look at some of the problems we talk about, okay, well, there's the housing issue and the food issue and then the medical issue, right? Those three things alone are a trifecta, right? If I don't have good housing, that means I'm not going to be eating properly. If I'm not eating properly, then that's going to probably affect my health. If I'm not living in a safe, secure, warm housing, that's also going to affect my medical. So now we got this round robin between housing, food, and medicine.
Yep.
Or healthcare that is going to create a spiral. If I can't get good housing or good food, it's going to lead to medical issues. So now we just add more pressure on systems that are already weakened.
And in many cases, the old model is failing us.
Yes.
Already.
Yes.
Or has already failed us, as we learned from the pandemic. So, no, and you bring us back, Z, right? You always have a great way of doing this. We got to remember, it's all one big, huge system. And when certain little aspects of the system get a little out of wobble, well, you don't notice it at first.
Yes.
It's that one system that gets a little out of alignment, it starts to affect all the others. It starts to put more stress and strain on the others. So there's no question, especially here in Denver, the unhoused situation, population, experience, whatever you want to call it, grew exponentially during the pandemic. And I don't keep track on all the other cities out there, but I know it became a more prevalent issue and remains that even as most middle-class folks have gone back to what we call a normal life, our folks that were impacted the most and still have nowhere to be are now once again the scapegoats and are being pushed around from relocation to relocation, and it's a multifaceted concern. Here in the suburb I live in, Arvada recently just spent $16,000 of city money to clean up an encampment, an illegal encampment in a place that was unsafe and unsanitary and a hazard to the population. And now we need to find a way to be able to not just go clean up those camps, but say, okay, hold on a minute. We're not here to kick you down the road. We're here to find a way to support getting you into transitional housing, getting you into mental health care, getting you into a program or a situation or a process where you can get healthy, where you can get fed, where you can get strong enough again to go out there and find a job, to go out there and do whatever it is you're here to do.
Yeah. I mean, and I, I am so in line with that because, again, as we said earlier, it speaks to the holisticness, right? If we add one more thing, mental health, to the first three, the housing, the food, and the medical, right?
Yep.
Mental health. If you're living on the street for a while and you're kind of tensed and you're suspecting everybody, that will affect your mental outlook, right? And so, if we as spiritual entities and institutions can set a standard, or at least put a benchmark out there somewhere that says, hey, when we look at life, these are the 4 or 5 cornerstones that we look at. Right now it's the food, clothing, and shelter, right? But we need to add some mental health and education to that bottle, let's say, so that because they begin to feed. If I'm not educated, then I'm not going to have as and educated does not mean college. Let's just say that right quick. It could be a trade or a skill,
right,
that gives back to the community. But if I'm not educated properly to provide service or product, then that's going to affect my ability to get housing, to get food, to get health care, which eventually will roll back around and begin to affect my mental health. And then if you go back the other way, it's going to do the same thing. And so we have this holistic approach of looking at life that begins to try, and you can't do it all, we know that, but that's where the partnership comes in. My organization is great at mental health. Your organization is great at finding jobs. So we figure out where the intersect is, and let's partner there, and let's put some shared resources there. So we begin to work beyond this, and that's where the consortiumship and the partnership begins to form and take place.
Yes. And I have this vision of who better than New Thought Communities right now to start building these networks, to start building these collaborative relationships. We have communities all over the country, all over the planet that complain that we're the best kept secret in the world, that complain they can't get more people in the seats. Sometimes I wonder if they're really open to getting the kind of people we're talking about in the seats.
Yeah.
Because let's be real. If you're running a pretty affluent community, opening the doors to the people that need the most help leads to a belief that we might offend our more affluent clientele, and therefore the money going to go away, and how are we going to pay for this, and this terrible spiral of what if these horrible things happen. And it's far too easy, I think, for spiritual communities to go there, for leaders to go there, because we have been insulated into believing it's me and my budget alone.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able to, I think, transform the whole financial sharing model of New Thought from sharing with my community, my church alone, to being able to share skills, gifts, talents, and money across the entire spectrum of who's doing the most effective work to change the hearts, the minds, and the lives of people that are in most need of what we have.
Yes.
Truthfully.
Yes. And that's, because when we look back at some of the old models, the idea of bartering, right, that has gone by the wayside in some respects. But when you think about how can we begin to use not only financial support but skills and talents to figure out what the right balance is of how we do that, how we utilize it, and it's a delicate dance, no doubt. But as we begin to form relationships and partnerships where we begin to understand truly what a person's skilled at and talented at, now I can better plan because I know the resources I have. I know the ones I don't, and now I know what I have to pay for or barter for or whatever the case might be to begin to create a system that's interrelated, whether we want to believe it or not. All of life is integrated.
Yeah.
And there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that's going to knock it all out. So the sooner we can begin to look at problems that way, not just look at the housing problem of, okay, we're going to build more houses. No. Yes, we need to build some more houses, but then we need to educate the people who've never had homes to live in. What does that mean? What does it mean to live in the community? How do you have to respond? How do you have to take care of things? And as a result of this, you get an educational outgrowth that begins to uplift individuals and families and communities, which is what we need.
Yeah. And therefore our culture.
Yes.
As you were sharing there again, I was struck. It's so ingrained in us that if someone ends up living on the streets, living under a bridge, the old sayings of how we describe those that are unhoused, every one of those came with a judgment that the person was broken and was therefore worthless. And that leads to that PTSD you keep talking, right? That we keep talking about as far as how tough it must be to be out there. And if we can just come back to that recognition that, wait a minute, the only reason it appears you don't have something to contribute is because nobody's ever given you the time of day to actually and figured out how you can contribute.
Yes.
They've just labeled you because you didn't contribute in a way they expected or in a way they liked, or it may be, and hey, we've all gone through some hard times, folks. But it's when society then says, well, you're no longer worthy of any of it.
Right.
Because you had a misstep, because you got, and there's one of those places we can start to do the work, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, and real quick, the one thing that popped into my mind when you said that, the statistics show now that there are more families and individuals that are working and living on the street or living a transitional life because of the real estate market has just they've been priced out.
Right.
I mean, it's not in places like Denver and Seattle and some of the other Chicago. It's not unlikely that a studio apartment that's 700 square feet is going to cost you anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000, depending on where you are, a month.
Right.
For a studio.
Two kids coming out of college, 2 kids coming out of high school can't survive on something. Even at $15 a minimum, right? Even if we're at minimum wage is $20 an hour, you can't survive at that. No. And that's the place where, again, we have to. I liked what that article said. Any spiritual community out there, if you own your own building, you got to find ways to make that building valuable to the community, not just the people that show up on Sunday and put money in the basket, but to the people that live next door and to the people that live down the block, and maybe to the people live a few miles away and can't get any of the resources that you might be able to provide. whether that's shelter, whether that's a food bank, whether that's a hot meal. I think about how many big churches across the city of Denver are sitting around and they've got these huge kitchens just sitting idle and empty 95% of the time.
Yeah. There's an opportunity for us. There's an opportunity for us to not to spread a particular faith, if you will, but to spread a faith in a divine order. Not, to spread the idea that there is a creative plan, that there is a quantum reality that is intelligent and works when we work with it, that allows us to create way beyond anything we can see. But we have to give up or tone down or transition, find the right word, how we approach this thing called spirituality, this thing called life, and this really, really important thing called interrelated community.
You just struck in me that question. But wait a minute. If I don't get credit for changing lives, then how does anybody know the good that I'm doing? And right? So can churches, I think this is a big identity problem for churches, for spiritual communities. Can we do this as if no one knew we exist? Could we do this without the need for the recognition, without the need to say, yeah, maybe the newspaper will pick up on this, or maybe the TV will pick up on this, and we'll get more people in the seats?
That's a tough one. And it can be done, I believe. It requires that concept that we often hear about now, leading from behind, right? Yeah. And the whole idea of I'll give up some of what I got to make sure I'm not walking down the street fearful that somebody's going to take it. Now, that may be a way people don't want to look at it, but I think that's a part of the puzzle that we have to look at and say, hey, I don't need to be out front all the time. Matter of fact, I may not need to be out front half the time, but what I do need to have out front is the good works that the community is doing, the lives that we are changing, the opportunities that are being provided, and the foundation of a faith or a spiritual tradition that allows people to come up out of that allows people to grow in a way that they develop their own faith and their own spiritual practices based on universal principles. Now, we're not talking about doing something haphazardly. We're talking about proven principles. The principle of electricity, and you hear me say this all the time if you're regular, is a proven idea.
Yep.
But that principle, the idea of creating electricity, can be from turbine, fossil fuel, hydro, nuclear, solar, many different ways of applying that principle, all valid, all give you the same thing at varying pressure points, if you will. But it's one principle that's guiding it all, the principle of electricity.
Yeah. Folks, if you wonder what you stumbled into here today, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. My co-host, Rev Z, and I get together every Tuesday. And we've been doing so many interviews, we haven't had a chance to just have a good free-ranging chat like this in a while. We're covering all kinds of territory. But we are going to take a quick minute to wet our whistle, say thank you to our sponsors and committed givers, and share a little bit more of what's going on around the network. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of New Thought Today in just a minute.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit. Thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
Yes. Thank you to all of our committed givers and organizational donors. We love you. We appreciate you. We couldn't do what we do without you. So please keep on doing what you do as well. If you'd like to become part of our committed giving program, please head on over to the website, ntmedia.org. Click on the donate button and make it a monthly donation. We'll take it from there. All right. So Z, here we are, right? We're coming into this idea more and more. How do we start modeling a concept where New Thought communities across various idea spectrums, let's say, can really begin to work together?
Well, I think we have to get a few committed members, partnerships, that are committed to the idea, not coming in per se with any expectations, any preconceived ideas, other than we are here to serve and to model what belief, faith, consciousness, and practicality looks like, and start from there. Whether that means we begin to join boards of different things, whether that means we begin to set up coalitions of 3 or 4 centers, churches that work towards something other than just interfaith conversations. I mean, the idea of interfaith is a great one, but I think it has served this purpose in that anyone that's willing to search and understand the intersection of all these different religions, I think that path has been thoroughly documented and supported. Now we need to go to the next step and say, okay, we all believe in life. We all believe that there's a supreme being. We may think about the manifestation of it differently, but now how do we begin to serve that idea so that we support life, so that we support an environment where people can actualize and be all that they want to be, as opposed to a place that's judgment because somebody doesn't have this type of clothes or this type of job or this type of house.
What I just heard was interfaith becoming interaction.
Yes.
and really interacting, not just, hi, how you doing, but taking action across faith traditions.
Yeah.
One of our friends, Reverend Sharon Mitchell out of Canada, says it takes a new thought to create new expressions, experiences, inclusion, and innovations. I would agree. It's all of those. It now is that time to take a new perspective, a new thought on how are we doing all of these different things and how can they work. Another good friend, Terry, says in her book about the future, she wrote about churches have a sanctuary, but the rest of the church is converted into small apartments to help with the housing crisis, which will get worse as climate changes and there are more climate refugees. And then Terry offers us a copy of that. Thank you, Terry. Anyone can go there. You check. That should be it's in the comments. It should be a live link if you're watching, folks, in the comments of the broadcast. If not, we'll drop it in. We'll make sure we get a chance to share that in some way again in the near future here. So before we completely run out of time, Z, cast a vision for me. Now, you and I have been doing this. We do this quite often as an activity. You and I are both centered here in Denver, Colorado area. We're both somewhat active within the city of Denver as far as the spiritual community there in New Thought, and becoming more so. Cast a vision for me. What would you like to see in 5 years, in a year, in 3 years, and to help foster this idea of bringing forth new thought in a more powerful way as an interactive consortium of leaders, organizations, communities. You have it.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it makes me kind of think about it in those terms, 1, 3, 5 years, if you will. And if I was to answer that, I just look at what I'm trying to do with my community. Is in this next year, and it's starting in January. Right now, we're doing some prep. We're just getting ready to go back to a hybrid service where we have service twice a month, actual live, and then twice a month or 3 times a month, whichever it works out to be, online. But to begin to create a framework of what do I want to be known for, if you will. Right. So we're looking to pick 2 or 3 things as a spiritual community that we want to be known for, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's food or mental health. But let's pick 2 or 3 things that we want to be experts in, if you will, from a spiritual perspective. Right.
Yeah.
And then begin to create partnerships with different community centers or different agencies or different individuals who can begin to say, how do we partner together to add this to the pie? And then begin to look for other organizations. Once we get that, look for other, the 5-year plan would be, or the 3-year rather. Once we get it for the 1 year of how we're doing, in 3 years, look for other pieces of the puzzle that fit in. If let's say we pick education and housing, then we want to look for somebody with food and mental health, maybe, or we want to look for somebody that focuses on transportation and family support, whatever that might be, and begin to form that coalition, to begin to form that consortium of when someone comes to the door, we can have some kind of intake, whether it's that if someone comes to my center and says, I need help with a job. Oh, well, we don't do that. But the center down the street does, and I know them personally, and I know exactly who you need to contact. Let me put you in contact with them. And I'm not concerned whether you come back to my center or you go to that person's center or you figure out a way. The thing is to begin to add the services and model the behavior. And if we believe in the law says we will attract what we are. So if I'm providing that kind of service, if I'm doing that, I'm going to attract the exact people that we are aligned with, that we are intertwined with cosmically, if you will, to continue our methods and programs as everybody else will as well.
Yep. I was just struck. How in the world do we expect to create a world that works for everybody if we're not willing to tell everybody where to get the best resources? If we're not willing to say, hey, that's not my gig, but I know a guy, I got a cousin, I've got somebody, I've got what you need. Let me hear and not just, hang around and we'll get you that, but no, here, I got that guy's card right in here. I let me walk you over to the computer and show you how to get there. Let me get somebody to walk you down the street to the resources that you need, whatever it might be. To me, this is a demonstration of what many would call a beloved community.
Mm-hmm.
Going beyond the me, mine, and getting into the we and the ours, and what can a community do to support those rather than just bolster our own selves. Our own little enclave of people that dress the same and think the same on Sunday mornings.
Because if we begin this idea of shared life, it doesn't matter, right? If I have someone and I send them to you, that's going to help me because that's one less whatever that I need to worry about. Or that's one more person that's going to be contributing and not less contributing to a solution, right? Or an upliftment or whatever it might be, right? We have to begin to think beyond our individual selves. And you and I have these conversations offline, and I'll just put it on Front Street right now. This whole idea of being a spiritual leader and how we are compensated. Now we know, people got to pay rent, people got to eat, or we're going to be in that group we're trying to help, right? So we understand that model, but we have to figure out, I don't need a Maserati, right? And if I get a Maserati, it needs to be off my own back, not off the back of my community, right? And so no one is saying that you can't be prosperous or you shouldn't be compensated as a spiritual leader. And one way of measuring is like anything else. It's in compensation model that's based on what's being produced. Right. But we have to begin to look at. I became a minister and got involved in this because I'm a community person. I want to help the community, because for me growing up, if there wasn't a community, if there wasn't a spiritual center, God knows where I would be. And so that affected me so much that I want to at least provide a platform for that to be available for others as well.
Amen. 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 And, I want to agree with you. I don't begrudge anybody that earns, that has that consciousness and wants nice things. But there is a difference between earning that from the collection plate and or not. So I always look at Joel Goldsmith in this example, because he doesn't take a salary from his community. And it's long been known that, and he is very prosperous. And anytime I hear people yelling, tax the churches and look at this rich preacher, it's not look at what the preachers created in their lives. It's not look at what they've been able to demonstrate. It's we've got to look at the avenue through which did they do that by taking an exorbitant salary while the church wasn't able to make its bills or didn't have a social action committee. If he makes his money by selling books, yeah, he's got a big congregation, and we puts out a book, he immediately sells 100,000 copies. That's fine. Let's not belittle the ideas, and I'm not saying that's what you did by any means, just what others have done. Is we yell about ministers should be poor, but then we also, we yell that they shouldn't make too much money, but then we want ministers to do all the work and to not rely on others, to coalitions to create organizations. And it's a spaghetti bowl when you dig in there, folks. I'll tell you that. This concept of trying to lead from a spiritual life and demonstrate a spiritual life, lead from a spiritual perspective, can get a little crazy sometimes. But I'm with you. The work is important, because at the end of the day, somebody is being uplifted into a better place in their community.
And when you look at it, I've only seen small surveys, if you will, but when you look at what young people are saying, they're looking at this thing, and they're looking at the people who are saying they're leaders, and they're looking at the disparity between what they're advocating and what they're practicing, right? And so they begin to look at it in some cases as a money grab, right? And they're like, no, because of the issues that they're faced with, they're looking at real issues: climate change, increased housing issues, increased education, healthcare issues, and they're saying, I need to be able to give my money to an entity, a leader, a faction, or however you want to call it, that's going to help support more people, more issues, not just an individual. And so it becomes very interesting when you begin to look at it again holistically about how we serve as spiritual leaders.
Hey, Lisa, we're with you. Lisa Mark says, I'm a science mind minister and I'm all about prosperity. Absolutely. I agree with you. And there are ways of doing that I believe are aligned, and there are ways that are a misuse of the law. Let's be what's aligned. And, a long time ago, I heard a speaker that would say, and she would generalize, but she'd say, overall, men want to make a lot of money and women want to save the planet. And her question would always come back to, so how much money does it take to save the planet? Now, we're not standing here saying the planet has to be saved, and we're not here trying to say it's only men that want to make money and that it's only women that want to save the world and help. But I think the question is valid. How much money does it take to change culture, to do these works? And to me, the answer is as much as it takes, and no matter what the number is, we can do it. Who better? This has been my new rally cry this month, and I'm going to keep it going. Who better than the people of New Thought to step into the breach that we face, to step into the divide that we face right now and say, we're here to make a difference.
And that difference, in a lot of cases, is prosperity for people. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
But prosperity looks different to everybody, right? For some people, prosperity is a thriving family that's supported and healthy and learning and kids are advancing. For some, it's a nice house on the beach. For some, it's the ability to give to a cause that they feel passionate about. So there is no ubiquitous idea about what prosperity is, but there is a ubiquitous idea about what life is, that you want it, and you want it more abundantly, and you want it health-wise, and all the different aspects of life. You want that regardless to anything. So when we can begin to focus on that, that is the focus. The focus is the life-giving force that's from the Creator that is endowed in everybody that's born on this planet. How do we make that prime? How do we make that the most important thing on earth? Everything else will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, Lisa, absolutely. When people know there is one source, that's everything shows up. All the resources necessary show up. All the aspects show up. The tricky part and the fun part is there are still a lot out there that don't know that. And there's still a lot out there that want to stand up in spiritual communities and share their not intentionally maybe, but share their ignorance, if you will, of this truth.
And it's just like when someone has a baby, right? That baby learns to walk because it sees mommy and daddy and brother and sister walking. It doesn't just pop up and walk. It's modeling a behavior that it's seen, that it says, wow, I want to do some of that, right? And so when we as spiritual leaders begin to do that and model what it means to show up and show out, as they say, and allow the resources of the divine to just be attracted to us, then you won't need to make any kind of announcements. People are going to say, boy, there's something going on over there, or there's something going on with him or her that I'm not sure who or what they are, but I want to find out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when we know the spirit is moving.
Exactly. And folks, we're here to move spirit, and we're here to be the movement of spirit, and we're here to move, we trust, to move you as well a bit, to say, hey, how do I look at my own spiritual community maybe from a different light? Maybe how do I make a suggestion to the leadership in my community on where to get involved? Maybe I am leading a community, I'm not sure where to get involved, and I need some help in figuring that out. We don't pretend to have all the answers, but we do pretend, well, not pretend, but we know that we have access to that resource that does have all the answers. Yes. And so there's nothing that we cannot accomplish, and there's nothing we cannot figure out when we're all working on this together. And that's what we're about. So we're going to get out of here for now. Thank you for being with us. Z, before we go, final thoughts?
Hey, the final thoughts is find some place, somewhere, some individual that you can share some ideas with and support them on a joint idea to support life.
Yes. Thank you. And I'm just going to say, if you'd like that to be at New Thought Media Network, hit us up. Send us an email, info@ntmedia.org. We got plenty of places to play, and we got some mighty big visions that we'd love to share with you, and we'd love to share your vision with the world as well. I'm Rev Robert. On behalf of myself, my co-host, Reverend LZ Sekou, we're going to get out of here. Wish you all the best, and we'll be back next week. Until then, please like, share, and subscribe. let some friends know what we're doing here at New Thought Media Network. Until then, peace and richest blessings.